Right, so how much volume should we be doing? A lot of people have this question where they wonder how many sets they should be doing in a workout. Like, some people think that they might be doing too much volume, which is probably 90% of you, and there's probably a small percentage of people out there that think they might not be doing enough volume. So today I'm going to break down exactly how much volume you should be doing, why training frequency matters, and why more isn't always better. Alright, so let's actually talk about what volume is and how it's defined. Simply put, volume is just the amount of work that you do in a session, right? But typically when we're talking about volume in this context, we're talking about the number of sets. Volume is one of the biggest drivers of muscle growth. To a certain point, there is a point of diminishing returns, but the more volume that you do, the more stimulus you're going to get, obviously, until that starts to fall off. There is a sweet spot, like too little, you're just not getting enough stimulus, but if you're doing too much, it's going to inhibit your recovery, meaning that you're not going to recover for your next session, which is going to result in less muscle growth, right? Because it's going to make it a lot harder to progressively overload if you're not recovering for each session. Now, a lot of people also worry about the amount of frequency that they're doing. So there is a huge debate, especially now, about whether 2 times a week or 3 times a week is better for muscle growth. Now, we definitely know without a shadow of a doubt that training twice a week compared to once a week, twice a week is just infinitely better, right? You're going to get a lot better results doing twice a week. That extra session allows you to split out your volume and get a better stimulus. Because if you're doing all that volume at the same time, it's just creating more fatigue, and that extra volume isn't necessarily going to contribute to more muscle growth. But what about training 3 times a week? Well, the research just isn't there yet. Like, some studies suggest that training 3 times a week will give you marginally better results, and then there's also other studies that just say that it doesn't have a significant difference whatsoever. But generally past twice a week, the frequency doesn't really matter as much as long as the volume is equated. So for example, if you're doing 12 sets for chest a week, you could split that up between 6 sets 2 sessions or 4 sets for 3 sessions. It's not really going to make much of a difference which one you choose. It just depends on your personal ability to recover. Like, if you're doing 6 sets twice a week and you're struggling to push yourself through those 6 sets, and you notice that you're not progressively overloading over time, possibly changing that to 3 times a week and doing those 4 sets might allow you to recover easier because you're doing less volume on those days, but the growth ends up being pretty similar. So the main takeaway is, when it comes to frequency, is doing at least twice a week is going to be perfectly fine. The difference between 2 and 3 isn't that much as far as we can tell so far. However, that might change in the future. Now let's talk about the amount of sets per session. This is where a lot of lifters can get things wrong and start doing too much volume, which is 90% of people. They end up doing too much volume and they're realizing why they're not growing. It's because they're not recovering from their previous session. The literature kind of suggests that doing any more than 6 sets per session per muscle group is just the point of diminishing returns. You're not really getting more benefit from doing more than 6 sets a session, because those extra sets are just adding to fatigue without giving much more stimulus to grow. Like, think about it, if you're already pushing hard for 6 more sets, after those 6 sets, you're kind of fucked, aren't you? Like, you're not really going to perform that well in those subsequent sets. All that they're going to do is just make you more sore, and it's going to be harder to progress in the future. Instead, it's much better to split that volume up during the week, like I just previously mentioned. So here's my advice. I would say people should generally aim for 8 to 12 sets per week per muscle group, and then just split that between 2 sessions or 3 sessions depending on your preference, to be honest. For example, if you're doing twice a week, if you're training each muscle group twice a week, doing 6 sets of back on Monday and then another 6 on Thursday is going to allow each session to be productive without inhibiting recovery. And if you do notice that you're not recovering, lowering the volume slightly is going to be very beneficial for you. I just had to do this myself. I realized that I was doing too much volume and I had to lower that volume, and then as I done that, progression just skyrocketed. I wasn't giving myself enough time to recover. So the main takeaway is this: your total volume throughout the week matters more than the frequency. At least just make sure that you're training your muscle group twice a week rather than once, and just try to avoid doing more than 6 hard sets per muscle group per session. Remember that your consistency and your smart training is going to matter a lot more than just hammering a muscle doing 20 sets per session. Focus on your effort, and your progressive overload over time is going to matter more than the amount of volume and frequency. If you found this helpful, check out my one-on-one online coaching and my training guides at scottcreasypt.com.